It was supposed to be an ordinary spring morning in rural Nova Scotia. But in just a matter of minutes, two young children, Lilly Sullivan, age 6, and her little brother Jack, only 4 years old, vanished without a trace. May 2nd, 2025. Lansdowne Station, Pictou County. A quiet property surrounded by woods and gravel roads. That morning, according to their parents, Lilly had been moving in and out of a bedroom while Jack could be heard in the kitchen. Nothing seemed unusual until suddenly both children were gone. At first, it didn't feel real. Parents often expect to find their kids hiding, playing, or wandering just out of sight. But minutes turned into frantic searching. Bedrooms were checked, closets pulled open, the yard scoured. Neighbors were called. And when no sign of Lilly or Jack turned up, panic set in. The RCMP received the emergency call just after 10 a.m. What began as a simple missing children alert quickly escalated into one of the largest searches Nova Scotia has seen in years. Within hours, over 160 people were involved: RCMP officers, specialized search and rescue teams, volunteers from across the province. Helicopters cut across the sky. Drones swept the treetops. Search dogs combed through thick brush. The scene was overwhelming. A rural landscape filled with officers in neon vests, lines of volunteers shoulder to shoulder, sweeping through dense forest and muddy trails. For days, the search area stretched farther and farther. Everyone was looking for even the smallest clue: a footprint, a piece of clothing, a broken branch that might point to where Lilly and Jack had gone. But nothing about this disappearance was simple. The terrain around the Sullivan home was rough, dense woods, uneven ground, ponds and streams hidden under the canopy. For searchers, every direction led to new challenges. One wrong step could erase a footprint. One gust of wind could scatter any trace of scent for the dogs. And while the hours dragged on, the questions grew louder. How far could two children, so young, possibly wander on their own? Did they leave together willingly, or did someone take them? News of their disappearance spread across the province like wildfire. Community members gathered in church halls and town centers, organizing shifts to keep the search alive. Flyers were printed. Posts flooded social media, their smiling faces shared thousands of times. The entire region was united by one desperate hope: bring Lilly and Jack home. But as night fell on that first day, hope began to mix with dread. Because for all the effort, for all the manpower, there were still no clear answers. And then in the days that followed, the first so-called clues started to appear. A boot print, items found in the woods, tips from people who thought they had seen the children. But as investigators would soon learn, not everything found in the search was what it seemed. The first days of the search were a whirlwind of confusion, determination, and desperate hope. And with every hour that passed, investigators faced a flood of new information, some promising, some misleading, and some downright baffling. One of the earliest findings was a boot print discovered in the woods not far from the Sullivan home. At first, it seemed like a breakthrough. Could it belong to one of the children? Or, more ominously, to someone else who had been there that morning? Investigators collected it carefully, but the print was blurred and shallow, offering more questions than answers. Not long after, items of interest were recovered: pieces of clothing, scraps of fabric, objects in the brush. Each discovery raised hopes, only for analysis to dash them. The clothing didn't belong to the children. The scraps weren't connected. Piece by piece, what looked like solid leads began to crumble. Meanwhile, the RCMP was inundated with tips from the public. Hundreds of calls poured in. People who thought they'd spotted the kids near a gas station, or walking by the roadside, or even in towns miles away. Officers chased down each report, reviewing security camera footage, interviewing witnesses, but time and again they hit dead ends. The investigation was relentless. Over 54 people were interviewed. Polygraph tests were administered. Hundreds of hours of surveillance footage were reviewed. Every corner of the surrounding communities was checked and rechecked. But here, the problem. When a case captures this much attention, not every lead is trustworthy. Some tips were based on rumors. Others came from well-meaning people whose memories blurred under stress. And a few, disturbingly, seemed to be outright hoaxes, wasting precious time. Still, the RCMP pressed forward. They even brought in specialized technology, drones that scan the forest from above, tracking heat signatures, K-9 units trained for missing person searches, data analysis tools to trace digital footprints. And yet, despite the sheer scale of the effort, the results were frustratingly thin. Lilly and Jack had simply vanished, leaving behind no clear trail, no solid piece of evidence that could explain what happened that morning. As the days stretched into weeks, hope began to fracture. Some neighbors whispered about an abduction, pointing to the lack of tracks, suggesting the children had wandered off on their own. Others clung to the belief that Lilly and Jack were still close by, waiting to be found. Through it all, their family remained at the center, pleading for answers, holding on to faith, and urging the public to keep searching. But then, months later, the case took a startling turn. In August 2025, newly released court documents revealed a shocking detail. Investigators had quietly shifted the way they classified the case. According to those documents, as of July 16th, the RCMP no longer considered the disappearance to be criminal in nature. Why the change? And what did it mean for the search for Lilly and Jack? For months, the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan was treated like an urgent criminal mystery. Every headline carried the word abduction. Every press conference echoed the same plea: if someone had the children, bring them back. But in August 2025, that narrative was shaken. Redacted court documents, quietly released, revealed a startling change. As of July 16th, the RCMP no longer classified the case as criminal in nature. To many, this revelation was shocking. How could an investigation that had consumed entire communities suddenly shift away from the idea of foul play? The documents themselves offered only fragments of answers. They confirmed that investigators had seized items, electronics, personal effects, data files, but the details were blacked out. They showed evidence logs, interviews, and surveillance reviews. Yet, crucially, they stopped short of connecting those pieces to a crime. For the families, this was devastating. For the public, confusing. Did this mean the children had wandered off on their own? Did it mean investigators had found something, but not enough to prove criminal involvement? Or, more chillingly, did it mean that evidence once considered suspicious no longer fit the story? The RCMP's wording fueled speculation. By stepping back from the criminal label, they left the case suspended in a gray area, not solved, not closed, but hanging in uncertainty. This wasn't just a shift in paperwork. It had real consequences for how people viewed the case. Those who believed in the abduction theory were outraged, convinced the authorities were backing away too soon. Others wondered if the children's disappearance could have been a tragic accident, a fall into the dense woods, or an encounter with wildlife, a possibility investigators had considered early but never ruled out. The backlash was immediate. Media outlets ran headlines asking, "Have authorities given up?" Families and community members questioned whether resources would continue at the same intensity. And online, theories exploded, everything from secret cover-ups to elaborate conspiracies about why the case was being reframed. Still, the RCMP maintained that the investigation was active. They reminded the public of the sheer scale. Over 54 interviews conducted, polygraphs used, hundreds of tips analyzed, hundreds of hours of footage reviewed. This wasn't abandonment, they insisted, it was recalibration. Yet that explanation didn't satisfy everyone, because if this case wasn't criminal, then what was it? Had investigators discovered something in the seized items that shifted their perspective? Had a promising lead collapsed under scrutiny? Or was this simply a legal strategy, a way to manage expectations until more evidence surfaced? Whatever the reason, the change marked a turning point. The disappearance of Lilly and Jack was no longer framed as a clear-cut crime, but as an unsolved puzzle, one where every theory was still on the table and every answer was still just out of reach. And that brings us to the hardest part of all: the theories, the unanswered questions, and the haunting possibilities of what really happened that morning. Every disappearance leaves behind theories, and in the case of Lilly and Jack, the possibilities are as chilling as they are uncertain. One of the earliest and most widely believed theories is abduction. Supporters of this idea point to the lack of solid tracks or evidence that the children wandered off. Two kids, just 4 and 6 years old, vanishing so quickly and leaving behind almost nothing, to many, it doesn't add up without outside involvement. But then there's the theory of wandering and accident. The woods surrounding their home are thick, dangerous, and unpredictable. Could Lilly and Jack have strayed farther than anyone imagined, slipping into terrain too difficult to search fully? Could the answers still be hidden under the dense canopy, in places searchers simply couldn't reach? And then there's the most unsettling theory of all, something closer to home. Some whisper about overlooked details, inconsistencies in statements, or the possibility of family involvement. Investigators have never confirmed such suspicions, but in high-profile cases like this, speculation always fills the silence. So which theory is closest to the truth? At this point, no one can say for certain, and that uncertainty is exactly what makes this case so haunting. What we do know is that the investigation is ongoing. The RCMP continues to analyze devices, review footage, and assess every lead that comes in. The government of Nova Scotia is still offering a $150,000 reward for information that could break the case wide open. That means there's still hope, hope that someone somewhere knows something they haven't yet come forward with. But here, the sobering reality. As months pass without answers, the likelihood of finding Lilly and Jack alive grows slimmer. That's the heartbreaking truth behind so many missing person cases. Yet until definitive evidence emerges, the story is not over. And that's where you come in. Do you believe this was an abduction carefully planned and executed? Do you think the children may have wandered into the woods, victims of tragic misfortune? Or is there another explanation, one we haven't yet considered? I want to hear your thoughts. Share your theories in the comments below. I'll be reading and responding to as many as I can. And if you've stayed with me this far, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Because this case is far from closed. In fact, the next update, whether from investigators, the courts, or a tip from the public, could change everything we think we know about the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan. Until then, stay curious, stay safe, and keep asking the hard questions.